Okay, I think we'll get started. So welcome everyone to our latest ASME Bite-Size session on what makes a successful widening participation program. I'll just start with a few housekeeping notes just on how this is all going to work. So the session will last approximately 50 minutes to an hour. If you wish to ask a question, please use the chat field on Zoom. This feature is available by clicking on the chat button at the bottom of your screen. And if we don't get time to answer all the questions, we will provide a document after the webinar with any questions we're unable to address. The chat field will also serve as our way of you contributing to the conversations, and we may invite some participants to expand on their comments by asking their permission to make their audio and video live. Please respond via the chat feed that you're happy for us to do this if we ask. The webinar is being recorded, and a video of the webinar will be available on the ASME website, along with any other support materials. If you're having any technical problems, we ask that you make ASME aware by emailing events@asme.org.uk rather than adding it to the comments field. So that's events@asme.org.uk. We are going to be on Twitter as well, so please do tweet along with us today by keeping an eye on the hashtag ASMEBITESIZE and JASME's Twitter page. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce some of our guests this evening. After a brief intro to widening participation from me, we'll be hearing from Rosie Patterson and Alex Clark, each speaking about a local WP initiative they've been involved in their areas. Followed by teams from Aspire Med UK and Scrubbed Up, who have started national WP initiatives online. This will be followed by a panel discussion where we'll also bring in Professor Colin Macdougall, who is chair of ASME's EDC and head of medical education at Warwick Medical School, and Dr Louise Alldridge, representing the National Medical Schools WP Forum, who is Peninsula Medical Schools WP lead and also program lead for BMBS with Foundation. So welcome again, everybody, to this webinar. Of course, I'd like to briefly introduce JASME, who've organized this webinar. JASME is the Junior Association for the Study of Medical Education and is a career group of ASME run by juniors, so medical students and FY doctors, primarily for junior healthcare professionals interested in medical education. Do visit our social media pages to get more of an idea of what we do, and feel free to contact us on the email address there. A particular opportunity I'd just like to really highlight for UK medical students is that we're currently recruiting for local reps for JASME, ideally trying to get a couple in each university. There's some information on this slide, but please do just get in touch if you think this may be of interest or you want some more information. Okay, we'd like to start off with a very quick series of polls just to try and gauge where people's experiences are so far in widening participation. So I think if I launch the poll now, you should be able to answer the questions on your own computers. Okay, so that's a good proportion of people aware of WP initiatives. If I do that. Okay. I'd like to ask another question now, whether you've ever actually been involved in a WP initiative, either providing or receiving. Okay, so that's actually looking like pretty similar numbers. And just one final question, just to start us off. We'd be interested to hear how many of you would feel confident creating your own WP initiative? Okay, so we're about 50-50 there. Thank you very much. So that's interesting for us. It looks like there's actually a fair bit of knowledge out there on in the audience already, in which case I'll try and make this introduction fairly brief so we can get on with the presentations and the discussion, which I'm sure will be far more interesting and engaging for you. Any questions that you would like to ask as I go through this very quick introduction, please do just post them on the chat. And then I think what we'll do is we'll just add them to the panel discussions later on, just to stay on top of timings. Okay, so what is widening participation? It's a term that's used for different things, and this is something we can potentially discuss a bit more later on. But a pretty clear definition I often go by is it's the process of encouraging underrepresented socioeconomic groups to apply for higher education. And this has specific relevance to medical education as, and this is a stat that always gets me, 3 times as many medical school applicants come from the most affluent fifth of areas compared to the most deprived fifth of areas. To expand on this a little bit more in graphical form, and apologies, I'm not too sure how well you'll all be able to see this. Hopefully you can make out though that there's a pretty marked social gradient of applicants and applications with accepted offers, with the most affluent IMD centiles on the right of each of these figures. In particular shown here is it's not just the applications which are so skewed, but almost identically so are those with accepted offers. The bottom line being that those from less affluent backgrounds are less likely to apply and gain an accepted offer to study medicine. Furthermore, not shown on this slide, but 1/4 of applicants to medicine went to a private school, with the equivalent in the general population being 6 to 7% of the population going to private school. This is in the UK. So why is widening participation important? Well, to help illustrate this, I've put some figures here which are taken from McKinn's Medical Education at a Glance. Starting here on the left, a core ethos that I certainly get behind is this image of intersecting identities. The idea that valuing and celebrating differences and diversity actually adds to a richer education experience for all. And we can then think a bit more in practical terms of equality versus fairness. Widening participation aims to overcome problems such as low home or school support, financial barriers to medicine, and to increase social mobility. And while this means not every applicant may be treated equally, what we can do is strive for creating a fair system that treats everyone as individuals and reduces the barriers stopping those from more disadvantaged backgrounds entering into medicine. So what strategies does WP currently consist of? This is a very broad and basic summary, and in reality it's more complex than this, obviously. And I'll just mention briefly each in turn. So starting with pre-application, outreach is something that all medical schools are required to provide, and it's about raising the aspirations of school students prior to making subject choices. And can consist of high intensity activities such as mentoring programs to lower intensity activities such as providing application information and open days. Access courses are part of further education and are delivered for free for people without the academic requirements to apply for medicine. At the application stage, it's important to use contextual data, which consist of indicators to identify disadvantaged pupils such as postcode or access to free school meals and so on, and to consider offering lower entry requirements for these groups. And then using more standardized selection tools is also important, such as MMIs, which are supposed to be less biased and involve more markers, and SJTs, which should be less coachable in theory than other tools. Then we have foundation courses or gateway courses. Foundation years are often exclusive to candidates of lower socioeconomic status. And although they're clearly a large financial and time investment, they have been effective at increasing socioeconomic diversity. Unfortunately, that's not enough in itself. Support needs to be continued throughout medical school. What I'm showing here are the mean normal deviate scores of over 4,000 King's College London, Southampton and Norwich medical students on finishing med school by type of entry, where EPM is the educational performance measure and PSA is the prescribing safety assessment. So clearly the difference compared to standard entry students is pretty stark, which is why this last point on the summary diagram is so important, which is support during medical school. So this can consist of financial advice, support with social aspects of learning, and very practical things such as ensuring access to free resources and tutorials. So in conclusion, hopefully from some of these data, I've convinced you that medicine has a long way to go in addressing WP. So I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of you. And widening participation benefits medical education more broadly than you may think. And as you can see here, a multi-pronged approach is needed pre, during, and post application. So thank you for listening to this first little bit, and I'm now delighted to move on to hearing about various WP initiatives, hopefully gaining some valuable learning points from each. So I invite Rosie, firstly, if you'd like to share any slides, then please do. Or are you using slides?
Yeah, I am just working out how to share my screen. As I wanted. Share. Hopefully, you'll all be able to see this in just a second. Have we got some slides? Yeah, good. I'm getting thumbs up and smiles. That's good. Hi, everybody. My name's Rosie. I am a Foundation Year 2 doctor down in Brighton. And I'm here this evening representing the Brighton and Sussex Medical School Outreach Programme, BrightMed, which I was a part of during my time at medical school. It formed a massive part of my medical school experience, and I've stayed involved with as a foundation doctor. So it's just to introduce you to that, really. And the reason I'm talking about BrightMed is because it is quite well recognised as an example of good practice. It's won lots of awards and been used as a model for some of the new medical schools coming through. So I mean, I'm biased, but I think it is quite a good outreach programme. So it's a good example to talk about tonight. So a little bit about Brighton, just to give you a bit of background. Brighton is one of these funny places where we have a massive variation in wealth. So we have some quite wealthy areas, but we have some of the most deprived areas in the country almost on the doorstep. It's quite shocking, the variation we have here. So we have quite an important region that needs covering in terms of widening access. And BrightMed and its associated programmes cover almost, well, the whole of Sussex into West Sussex. And there's three different strands to the way that the Brighton and Sussex outreach works. There's BrightMed, which I'm going to talk about tonight, which is for children aged between sort of 14 or 13 and 17. And then there's Bright WAMS, which is aimed at the littler ones in primary school, and Bright Ideas, which is a more virtual system. So that it's very multi-pronged approach with some high intensity, some low intensity initiatives. But BrightMed, so it looks at students in between year 9 and year 13. And the criteria for students coming to join BrightMed is that they must be identified as having an academic potential. So that means they're usually part of a gifted and talented programme, or they've been identified by their teachers as being a kind of a bright spark. And then they need to be from a disadvantaged background. And BrightMed have a lot of criteria for how that works. They're quite strict on those criteria because we get a lot of people interested. But there's a lot of different things that we use to define someone as disadvantaged. And then Within that, people can either self-nominate, so they can identify themselves as being interested, or they can be nominated by their school. And year on year, it's kind of grown and become bigger and bigger as more and more people know about it. And we provide lots of different activities, which I'll talk more about in a second. But on the bottom of this slide, hopefully, if the slides are still working, you can see a kind of overview of our curriculum that we have. So in the earlier years, we talk more about kind of general science, anatomy. We kind of keep things modelled alongside the curriculum. And then as the students get a bit older and get a bit more interested in medicine, hopefully, we start to diversify the curriculum and go a bit more outside of what they're learning in school. And then as they get into year 11, year 12, we start focusing on personal statements and applications, that sort of thing. And really, there's two main focuses to BrightMed. The first is raising these kids' confidence levels and their aspirations and giving them a bit of insight into what life is like as a medical student and a doctor. And the second thing is about actually saying it's okay not to be a doctor and to realise that, no, this really, really isn't for me. So we think it's just as important for young people to get an understanding that maybe this is nothing to do with what they want to do as that it is. And the days work, so different year groups come in on different weekends all throughout the year. So they get kind of between 8 and 10 days each year. And they spend full days in the BSMS med school building, almost acting as if they were first or second year medical students. They go to lectures, they have seminars, there's small group work, there's lots of activities. You can see in some of the pictures some of the sorts of things we do. We get them practicing real clinical skills, examining each other, doing living anatomy. And I think one of the key things about this is it's taught by medical students, many of whom are from WP backgrounds, although not exclusively, and that these medical students are paid to do it. So for a lot of them, it is their part-time job, which I think helps with modelling. And then finally, to finish off, when they get to year 13, we have a residential. So the students spend a week with us, staying in university, in halls, really simulating the life of a medical student or a foundation doctor. And that, we hope, gives them a really realistic insight into what life is like as a medical student. So that's it, really. That's a quick summary of BrightMed. I could talk about it for hours, but I think probably there's more interesting chats to have here. So I'll leave it there. Any questions, pop us a tweet. How do I stop here? There we go.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll just keep rolling for the time being, just to give maximum time for the second half of this session on the panel discussion. So Alex, would you like to talk a little bit about our second kind of local initiative that we're showcasing this evening?
Hi, can people hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful. So AIM, which stands for Accessibility in Medicine, is a widening participation programme based in Edinburgh that's just going into its third year of operation. I'm Alex, my pronouns are they, them, and I founded AIM and acted as its president for 2 years. So just a bit of background, AIM has 3 teams: the schools team, resources and tutorials. The resources and tutorials are our attempt to provide free, peer-led academic help to all medical students in Edinburgh. This was intended to, and does, fill a need caused by the only other available academic peer-led support in Edinburgh, requiring a pretty hefty membership fee to access prior. So we were created kind of with that in mind and to fill that need. The schools team is a widening participation scheme in a bit of a more traditional sense. It was created to recognise that widening access in Edinburgh often provides fantastic general help to a large number of pupils, which is absolutely fab. But many people have access to individual tailored help from people like older siblings or parents, friends, private school alumni, the kind of thing that's very difficult for large widening access schemes to provide. You know, things like personal statement checking, career advice, even just like knowledge of what med school is like, or having a role model that's close to you that you can talk to. So we realized it was actually, from our position as medical students, quite easy and cheap to pair up medics with a one-to-one online mentorship relationship with local students disadvantaged by circumstance. We started small. So far we've had 26 such successful relationships, with more on the way this coming year, and the potential to expand out to other areas of Scotland. So from AIM, what have we learned about running a widening participation scheme? Well, the first thing would be cooperation, and this is both within your scheme and out with it. Within the scheme, I'll say to anyone that will listen that AIM would never have gotten off the ground from my initial idea if it wasn't for the committee. Each sub-team, you know, those 3 teams had designated leads, including our wonderful host, Ed. And as a control freak, it was both difficult and hugely important for me to learn to rely on them and trust them. But also out with your scheme, one of the biggest things we learned is that there is just no point in running a widening participation scheme if there are other people already working on what you're trying to do, right? So if you have a new niche to fill, brilliant. But if there are already other people in that niche, offering them help is the best thing you can do. You know, lots of people doing a job inconsistently in different areas is never going to be as helpful as a big group doing it really well and working together. You know, we benefited, for example, from working with Access to the Professions, which is the University of Edinburgh's main widening access group. You know, we met with them a lot. And they also were able to provide us with experience, resources, contacts that we could benefit from. And it's easy to get sort of territorial or proud and to want to have all your work under your own banner, but having this widening participation community really did help us so much. The second thing would be continuity, and this is the concept that disadvantage isn't left at the door, which has already been pretty brilliantly explained by Ed in his introduction. What AIM does, therefore, is we provide these tutorials and resources under the same banner that we help high school pupils under. Therefore, particularly as we expand, those pupils who have already received our support in the past feel able to ask for help from an organisation that they already know has their best interests at heart. So it's just a great sort of concept to bear in mind that we've put a lot of thought into. And finally, sustainability. Like the kind of continuity we want to provide and the kind of efficacy we're aiming for, it requires years of growing and experience. When I first started to think about AIM, I'd applied to med school the year before. And when we went public, it had been 3 years, and now it's 5, right? The UK CAT isn't even called the UK CAT anymore. So these new schemes, they just need like new ideas and blood and people familiar with what entry to medicine is actually like today. So it's just really important to stay future focused, which is what we've been dealing with right now. So the things I learned were to work with the committee, work with other schemes, work with the same pupils for as long as you can, and do what you can to ensure that the scheme outlasts you. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone else.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex. Just a quick note while I'm speaking is just to say that I think some of the comments and discussion that are coming through are just coming through to the panelists at the moment on the chat. So do make sure, if you would like everyone to see rather than just the people who you can see on the screen at the moment, to select all panelists and attendees. Brilliant. I'm just trying to remember who I suggested went next. The scrubbed up team, would you like to, if you're using slides?
Do you mind if we share our website at the end after we speak? But for now, we're all cool.
Perfect.
Just give me a sec. But yeah, hey guys, my name's Hithan Noble. I'm a 3rd year medical student at the University of Manchester, and I'm joined by...
Hi everyone, my name is Maria Chaudhry. I'm also a 3rd year medical student at the University of Manchester, and me and Hithin started the Scrubbed Up website in May this year.
Yeah, so we co-founded the website with basically 2 primary aims. So firstly, to provide advice we wish to have known ourselves for the application process that you really can't find anywhere else.
And also to provide a realistic insight into what life at medical school is actually like, whether that's through articles, blogs, or our student-run forum.
The strength of Scrubbed Up is the fact that it's been a collective effort. We have over 200 medical students that have contributed to the website, whether it's actually being part of the team or the content of the website itself, so articles and blogs. These articles are from people from a variety of different backgrounds, experiences, and medical schools across the UK. The aim of Scrubbed Up is essentially to be a representative platform for all.
We've got articles on mental health, commuting from home, dyslexia at medical school, everything on what a foundation year is like, because medical school is a unique environment where people have different experiences, and that's what we really want to showcase.
It's been a pleasure to see Scrub grow from strength to strength with the support of some incredible organisations, from local student societies to organisations such as the RAF in Career Wales, as well as the University of Manchester.
Something that we felt was really important was to make sure that our services were free and accessible for everyone. So for example, we've got a free personal statement checking service, and we also conduct webinars throughout the year to individual schools across the country.
We've also believed in the ethos of giving back, and therefore we've been partnered with the David Knott Foundation since our launch. They do fantastic work training surgeons and doctors across the globe in areas of natural disasters and conflict.
We'd really like to thank the team at JASME and ASME for inviting us. So that's Ed, Rosie, Ryan, Lee as well, for inviting us to this conference. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak alongside these incredible widening participation initiatives.
Mari and myself and the rest of the Scrub team are hugely passionate about widening participation. First, we believe the medical students who are the doctors of the future should be representative of the population they're going to eventually treat.
There are so many challenges that come with applying to medical school from a widening participation background, such as finding work experience, having other applicants to speak to, even just having role models like Ed mentioned, like medical students and doctors that you can speak to, and then other things like financial difficulties.
We believe there's not enough support for medical students from a WP background once they actually reach medical school. Starting university is a very exciting but daunting prospect, and each individual has their own challenges to overcome.
So imposter syndrome is something that a lot of medical students are faced with, especially if you're from a WP background. And we really want to tackle these issues like head on and show students that if you are good enough to get into medical school, then you're good enough to be there.
To help support students with the application process, we've partnered with local WP initiatives such as Pathways to Health in London, helping the BAME community in the Tower Hamlets. We conduct Q&As through webinars where students have the opportunity to ask questions about any of their specific concerns regards to their medical school application process. Furthermore, we've made resources on the website designed to guide students through the process of application itself.
Something that we're really lucky to be able to work with the University of Manchester is on a new WP mentorship scheme that's designed not only to help ease the transition for first years that are starting this year, also to support them throughout their years at medical school on their journey to becoming a doctor. And we've made sure that the mentors are from a WP background themselves, so that the students have got a role model that they can actually relate to.
We're also in the process of designing a dedicated page on the website with resources on how to deal with various challenges for WP students, such as travel to medical school, accommodation, financial advice, and various support networks. We essentially want to create a community where students feel comfortable discussing such issues.
And that's basically Scrubbed Up in a nutshell.
And yeah, and we hope you can all continue to support us and continue when we continue our work. And please contact us if you'd like to get involved, whatever that may be, from contributing articles and blogs to participate in our forum. Literally, there's so many possibilities. So yeah.
Thank you very much for listening. And if you've got any questions, we'd be really happy to answer them.
Yeah, I'm happy to share, just give you guys a sneak peek of the website as well, very quickly. Yes, this is our homepage, and we try to make it as sort of as aesthetically pleasing as possible. So yeah, so as you can see, our forum got like 150 articles, our blogs, our statement checkers, as well as our partner charity as well. So yeah, feel free to explore, guys, and hopefully link to the website and socials will be available after the talk and stuff. So yeah, that's us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone so far for sticking so well to the timings as well. It makes my job a lot less stressful. So last but not least, would the ASMEBITESIZE team like to give their presentation?
Hi everyone, thank you to JASME for inviting us to speak. It's such a pleasure to speak here. So we are 3 medical students who co-founded ASMEBITESIZE, and my name is June and I'm a 5th year medical student at the University of Glasgow.
And I'm Luke, I'm also a 5th year medical student at the University of Glasgow.
And I'm Wenton, an integrating medical student at Imperial, and I've just finished 3rd year at the University of Birmingham. So we founded ASMEBITESIZE just over 3 months ago. From the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown, we saw a rapid and large increase in the amount of free online resources, information, and teaching available for medical students, But however, we didn't see that this was replicated or mirrored for pre-medical students.
We witnessed a cascade of events following school closures, such as cancellations in outreach programs, while paid-for options rapidly increased. And we were concerned about the potential implications for equality across the medical applicant cohort, in particular with how students from widening participation backgrounds might be disproportionately affected.
So we set up the ASPIREMED Medicine Applicants Virtual Conference. This was a one-day event on Saturday, the 8th of August that ran from 9 a.m. to 5:15 p.m. The target audience was all aspiring medical students regardless of background, and we held it on Zoom. And best of all, it was completely free.
So with ASME EDC, we aim to host a free online conference providing an overview of the medicine application process. We hope to democratize information, resources, and support by removing barriers to access and costs. So we started the day with 4 goals for our participants: to inspire, motivate, inform, and prepare them for applying to medical school, and also to collate, showcase, and signpost free resources from WP societies and organizations.
To achieve these goals, we collaborated with speakers and organizations, as well as widening participation societies from universities across the country. Following our ethos of widening participation, we invited students from state schools to register for the conference first, before opening up to other schools. And we were grateful to be joined by inspirational speakers such as Dr. Enam Haig, Professor Dame Parvin Kumar, the UCAT, BMAT, MSc, and GMC. And it was followed by interactive workshops in the afternoon. We also had speakers from Access to Medicine programs represented in both England and Scotland. To facilitate access for all, we held this as a free recorded Zoom webinar. And we included a research element as we wanted to understand the main barriers that applicants felt they faced and how this links with opportunity and resources.
And these are some of our results. We had almost 1,500 attendees join us throughout the day. Our fantastic team of dedicated ambassadors, speakers, and workshop hosts answered over 1,300 questions from our attendees in the Q&A. We were delighted to work with over 58 organizations. This included 35 WP initiatives and societies who sent in 2-minute videos showcasing their work, which we showed throughout the day. And in total, across all the attendees throughout the day, we had almost a year of watch time.
We were delighted to receive such positive feedback from our delegates. The comments completely blew us away, and it was a real honor to provide this experience to the students. We also created social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter in June. On our Instagram, we post daily under themed days, for example, aptitude tests on Mondays, interviews on Tuesdays, and Thursdays for a trending health topic. We have since amassed over 1,100 followers on Instagram and over 500 on Twitter.
We hope this presentation demonstrates the feasibility of a virtual one-day conference for widening participation, with clear advantages of being accessible, interactive, and affordable. And it was a tremendous pleasure to reach all participants from all corners of the world from the comfort of their own homes.
And finally, we'd just like to acknowledge Dr. Enam Haig and Dr. Claire Ray, who helped us enormously with the event. And thank you to all the speakers and ambassadors and all students and participants throughout the day. And thanks again to ASME and JASME for inviting us to speak.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. So inspiring, I think, while I was listening to these, at how most of them were really kind of driven by students and or very junior doctors, which is really great to see. I think we're just going to have a little bit of a reshuffle of who is on the screen for our panel discussion now. So there'll be one representative from each of the initiatives we've just heard from, as well as Professor Colin Macdougall and Dr. Louise Alldridge. I wonder if we've heard from most people on the panel now. I wonder if Colin and Louise, whether you'd like to just introduce yourselves a little bit and what you've kind of been involved with WP in the past.
So shall I go first, as you named me first? Thanks, thumbs up from Louise. So I'm Colin Macdougall, and I'm primarily here because of my ASME role, which is as chair of the Educator Development Committee, which is really about developing educators, education, and all of that kind of thing. And really the whole area of widening participation, widening access, the follow-on areas of decolonisation of the curriculum and support and everything all falls within the remit of the sorts of things we're trying to provide for educators at all stages of their development. So that's, I guess, kind of why I'm interested. You'll know from the introduction as well, I'm also head of a medical programme. I'm head of the programme at Warwick Medical School. I do notice with some slight embarrassment, I have both member of staff and a student as attendees who could probably talk much more eloquently about some of the things that we've been up to at Warwick, but I may be able to feed in some local examples as we go through in the question and answer.
Okay, hi, I'm Louise Alldridge. So I'm actually an Associate Professor of Biomedical Science at Peninsula Medical School, where I also lead for WP. So I've been in the sort of WP world for probably, well, before some of you are born maybe, I don't know. But my first lead role was in Australia at a medical school, and it kind of, I thought when one of you was talking about, you were talking about who's underrepresented, it's quite interesting because Australia's not as classed. It hasn't got, you know, such a structured class system as we have. So the people that we were reaching out to there were the Indigenous population. So if you ever go and do some amazing sort of international work, you'll be working with, you know, some incredible people. So I worked with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders there, and I learnt so much. However, having said that, the system is the same, and all the work that you're doing that we've heard about today is all applicable. Today, very briefly, I'm just representing the National Widening Participation Forum. So Inam Al-Haq, who's been mentioned already, he's the chair, but he wasn't able to make it today. And that forum is sort of about 20 medical schools it represents, and it's a sort of highly collaborative group, and mainly it's looking at access and progress, looks at research opportunities, and is kind of a sort of senior sort of influencer of senior policy makers, because we have the Medical Schools Council on the forum as well. So I won't go on too much, but if you want to know more about it, I'm happy to answer questions on that. I think that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you both very much. So please do come in with any questions you may have to the panel. Clearly, we've got a kind of range of experiences here, from kind of local initiatives to national ones, and then also people with a career of experience in WP as well. So we've got a first question coming in now from Janice, which is, how do you see WP initiatives working in the post-COVID world? Would anyone like to comment on that? Louise.
So am I unmuted? I am unmuted. And there's lots of, you know, initiatives you can do, and we've heard some really good ones today, but I think my biggest fear is this loss of learning. So there's been a lot of you know, research on school closure and how that is disproportionately affecting our target, people from disadvantaged backgrounds. So I think what I'd like, you know, to see is more tutoring, because we can go out and build aspirations, we can build confidence, we can build the sense of belonging. But at the end of the day, if these pupils don't get the grades, which, you know, I've also run a foundation program, so we've got lower grades, but BBB is still very, very difficult to get. And this loss of learning has severely affected our group, our customers, if you like. So I think it really you need to think about some sort of academic tutoring, really. Would be one suggestion anyway.
Colin.
I think I would also add in, I guess, the slightly more positive spin. I fully accept the job is harder from everything that you just said, Louise, and exactly the groups that we would want to be building up and supporting are exactly going to be the most impacted groups. However, if we look at some of the initiatives we've heard about, some of the tools we've got are actually now more equitably available. And I know at the extremes, there are real IT issues for some people, and there are Wi-Fi issues and all sorts of things, but actually the ability to run something for anybody and everybody on an equitable footing to find people, to access people, for people to find stuff up to a point is also a bonus. And I think just to take the example for one brief moment, perhaps work experience is more equitable because a lot of the hands-on stuff that everybody who had advantage and a mate and uncle or whoever was able to do is all just shut off to people. All the stuff that's accessible online that can be targeted, that doesn't actually involve that kind of personal access, is up for grabs. I think we need to grab that window and maybe think very hard about how we preserve some of that, because of course things will slide back to exactly where we were pretty quickly up to a point, hopefully in some spheres, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, just to add on to that, just in terms of Scrubbed Up, our reliance on online resources and such as Zoom, like if you asked last year, could we use Zoom and the sort of possibility of webinars to sort of to showcase advice, then no. But due to the pandemic, there's a huge reliance on Zoom, especially now with medical school, but also to provide advice to maybe younger years and school students as well. And more people are using it, and it's easy to get sort of advice across and sort of initiate sort of schemes such as some of the things that we've sort of seen today, basically.
It's interesting the mention of work experience being more equitable. I was both bemused and frustrated that in early August, when medical students were having their time cut on the ward to maintain social distancing and COVID measures, that there were work experience students coming in via a friend of a dad kind of thing, which was interesting to see. Rosie.
And I think, I mean, we could be very depressed about the fact there are groups of society who are always going to get advantage. I think we've got to kind of accept that and try and pull everybody up behind and provide as much as we can. I'm afraid that people with sharp elbows will always have sharp elbows. We can try and perhaps limit some of that activity a bit. I think it's very hard.
Rosie?
So one thing that BrightMed were working on not so long ago, and I don't know where that's got to actually, was some sort of virtual work experience where we were recording pretend consultations in GP surgeries using real life GP surgeries, so that people could engage with work experience virtually. And I wonder if that is something in a post-COVID world that might take off a little bit more. It's not something I've heard of yet, but I wonder if anybody's involved or has any ideas for it.
From AIM's point of view, we were thrilled during COVID with the response to what used to be our in-person academic tutorials turning to online tutorials. The lack of barrier to essentially like room sizes not allowing a certain number of people in meant that we could triple our numbers without having to get tutors back in to do multiple sessions. So that was great. On a more general note, you know, it's with the way that, for example, work for so many people has been affected, it's going to be interesting to see what the challenges are for widening participation to these kind of careers when the gap is kind of getting wider and, you know, so many people are moving from areas of uncertainty to abject poverty. It's going to be, I think it's yeah, somebody said in the chat that COVID's provided a lot of boons and a lot of threats, and I think that's a very apt way of describing it.
And I do believe that COVID has sort of allowed for the opportunities of online learning as we're experiencing now on Zoom. And I think the effect of being able to spread your message to a vast audience, regardless of sort of their social economic background or their location, is incredibly powerful, and allows really high quality sort of events to be spread and shared to people who might not have access otherwise, who might be in corners of the world, or who may not ever have the sort of know-how to get in contact with someone who knows.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Just so this doesn't turn into a half-hour chat about COVID-19, and so we can focus on other areas of widening participation too, I think I'll move us on. Louise, something you mentioned, which I think was mostly targeted towards Scrubbed Up's initiative. You mentioned kind of tackling imposter syndrome, and I think Louise was asking in the chat, you know, how can we tackle imposter syndrome? Are there any things that you've had experience of doing, or anyone else?
No, I mean, I asked that because I was intrigued, really, because that's something that we have the luxury in our foundation year really to tackle that, because we have a whole year with our year 0 students to really build their confidence up, get them used to the physical space they're learning, the people who are teaching them, the way we're assessed, and we literally do work really hard to to ensure that they hit the ground running. They know that they are good enough to be there. They know that they're, they belong there, and they're really good students. But it's difficult with, outreach. That's a luxury to have students for a year and work with them. I mean, that's why I was interested in asking, how do you tackle that in outreach sessions or interventions? That would be very interesting to know that.
Yeah, so sorry. With our mentorship scheme, we really want to ensure that our mentors were from a WP background. So essentially, they looked up to role models and people that can really relate to their sort of issues, especially with imposter syndrome. I.e., each individual has their own individual problems. So if they've got someone to talk through them problems, I think it just is a step closer to sort of easing that sort of transition between school and medical school and further on from that. So I think someone to talk to, I think, is really important, because university, it's such a sort of daunting and unique environment. And despite there being so many people, it can be very lonely and very isolating, especially being put in place in such a new environment. So yeah, I think someone to talk to, I think, it's a really easy thing to say and to do, I think, and that's where our sort of mentorship scheme, the base of our mentorship scheme lies.
Yeah, for our mentorship scheme, without even specifically focusing on making sure we had mentors from a WP background, so many of the volunteers came specifically because they wished they'd had someone from their background to talk to 3 years ago, which has been really lovely to see.
I think there's some lovely examples there of modelling and mentorship at the medical student, junior doctor level, but I think we've got to start thinking big and bold here, and there's a real challenge here to medical schools, universities, NHS organisations. You can't become, or you can't aspire to become, what you can't see necessarily. And at all levels of organizations, visibility, modeling is very important, and it's great what you guys are doing, but we don't actually necessarily want people just to aspire to be a medical student. We want people to aspire to be all phases of all professions in all areas, and I think there's a big challenge there. I suppose the other thing that I'd put, just in terms of preparing people around their own sort of self-image, but also around applications, is something medical applications get a bit obsessed about, is how long people have wanted to become a doctor and how it's always been their dream and how it's everything they've been working for. And actually, that's quite hard if it's only been the last year or two you even discovered it was a possibility for someone like you from where you're coming from. And I think we need to think a little bit about the value we put on those kind of things when we're looking at assessment.
Yeah, so it was great mention of formal mentorship schemes, but also informal mentorship is also very powerful. So informal mentorship meaning sort of one-off conversations in the corridor of a ward and on placement. At the end of the day, every conversation that we have is a learning opportunity for someone. We're always conveying information with conversation. So using all of the interactions that we have to provide opportunities and role models, even if we don't realize it, for someone is very powerful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I just had a quick glance at Twitter, and there's lots of discussions going on there too, which I'm sure may continue over the next few days. So if you want to continue any of these discussions, please do access the JASME Twitter page. And Rosie's doing a fab job of conveying what's going on. A question from Richard, which is about whether the UCAS application itself needs a bit of an overhaul for medicine specifically, whether the general UCAS application works for medicine, so whether the introduction of multiple small white space questions rather than a single personal statement may be beneficial. Did anyone have any thoughts on that?
I haven't heard about this potential model before. So I guess my first question about it would be, would these be the same questions every year? Like, my initial thought would be to worry about coachability, which is kind of a problem with personal statements already, who wrote them. And one that to me would seem like it could permeate that sort of system also, but I'd be really interested to hear more about it, either from Richard or from anyone on the panel who knows about how that could be used to be more WP friendly, because it is truly the first time I've heard of it.
So I think it was a suggestion rather than a scheme that's coming into play anytime soon. I mean, if we were to have this, can anyone think of how these white space questions could be made more WP friendly, or any other aspect of the UCAS application for that matter?
Just briefly, I mean, I agree with Alex. It could be coachable when you don't know who writes those personal statements or even those white space bits. But we don't look at personal statements at Peninsula Medical School at all, and I'm sure there's other medical schools that don't because of that specific fact. So
we don't look at them either.
No.
It'd be interesting to know how many do actually.
I know Edinburgh does, but Dundee, for example, only makes people defend it at interview. It doesn't even come into whether or not you get an interview. I'm definitely for that.
I think, though, this question is one of the interesting examples of how I think we've heard some incredibly impressive and exciting initiatives that are kind of ground up and about supporting people, but actually, once those are up and running, the next step is a much more systems thinking. Now, up to a point, I think we're being challenged here by trying to solve the problems of all of society, poverty, education, disadvantage, etc. But we can only try and solve our little bit of it. But it is pre-application. It's the whole mechanism application. It's not just making sure people get better coaching. It's that the system actually works well. It's it's throughout all of medical school. It's modeling beyond. As I say, I've never particularly thought about how you might remodel a UCAS form because we largely ignore them, and I think that says something.
It certainly does. Apologies for those who are watching this from outside the UK. UCAS is the kind of national application to universities within the UK. Perhaps a final question, I think, from Jade, who is founder, I think, of the Widening Participation Medics Network. Do you think there's scope for WP students to get lost if they don't go in through the foundation year? Do you think there's more chance of them kind of getting less support at medical school because of that compared to those who do go through the kind of foundation year route? Anyone have any?
I haven't seen any evidence of that really, but our foundation program's we've only had 1 year of it, so it's hard to comment really. I think the other thing is that the students that tend to go into foundation years have quite serious markers of disadvantage. They're ticking all the contextual markers, and we're taking refugees, care leavers. So I think it's slightly different maybe from some of the students that do go into direct entry, but I haven't, I think, that's, some of the initiatives that we've talked about today talk about that kind of retention thing. So you're not just picking them up, you're not just putting aspirations in there. Once they're in, you've got to support those students all the way through. And I think most medical schools have very good support strategy, but I think you know, you do need to be aware that some students may need more support. And I think education of the educators about students from WP backgrounds, without singling them out, is very important, because, you know, that they may not have been used to having students from those kind of backgrounds in their medical school up until recently. So it's that awareness as well might help, but no direct experience.
Okay.
I suppose I'd just put in one slight note of caution. I think longitudinal support is vital, and that what's necessary in terms of that support will be quite individual. We've got to be slightly careful we don't grab a group of people, label them, keep that label on them, and keep doing stuff to them in some very tick boxy way. A lot of, I'm sorry to say this, within higher education, a lot of initiatives are quite tick boxy and quite, you've got to show that you're doing certain things, and that can have unintended consequences. So we need people to feel they belong, feel supported, have that support, and be allowed to both succeed and fail appropriately, if that makes sense, with all of the support, without actually us othering them during the course and potentially the rest of their career.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we'll start to wrap up. It's been really great to hear all of your insights from your own initiatives and to the discussions. Hopefully for those watching, there's a fair few opportunities that have been discussed where you can get involved. And from the examples of local initiatives, clearly there have been some successful WP initiatives set up by even kind of very junior people, including medical students. So from at least today, certainly don't be afraid to try and start something yourself if you do identify a niche. As I've said, the discussions may well continue on Twitter. So if there is something else you wanted to contribute, please do there. I realize there have been some questions we've not been able to address today, unfortunately, but we will endeavor to make note of these and collate some form of response to those that we've not been able to touch on. So thank you again to all the panelists for your insights. I'd just like to highlight the next event as part of the ASME Bitesize. So these have been a series of events that started earlier this year, of which today was one of them. And that's an event on the impact of teaching styles and assessments in medical schools on the postgraduate careers of doctors, which is on the 7th of October. And you can find information about that and all other ASME events using that link. So thank you for coming again. We'd be very, very grateful if you could just spend 1 minute completing this online feedback form for us. It will just help us to plan and develop future events, kind of tailored a bit more about what's useful for those of you who are watching, either by the bit.ly URL or the QR code there. If you'd like an attendance certificate for today, you can simply tick this on the form, and by the magic of modern day technology, you'll be sent a certificate automatically. A video of today's webinar will be made available on the ASME website in a few days. So unless anyone has any final comments that they would like to wrap up with, I just again extend the plea to give us some feedback, and thank you all for coming.